Military professional would understand this. Russia today has between 700 and 900,000 forces operating in the special military operation area. They might be able to surge this up to over 1 million. That million will be hard pressed to continue this advance that's going on right now, and expanding it to, instance, some of the things that people talk about, the total reconquest of Kharkov, maybe the conquest of Sumy or parts of Sumy, and the conquest of Odessa to create a land bridge to Transnistria. That million may not be enough to do that. So they might need even more troops to do that. And that's going to be stressful to Russia to come up with more troops. That's expensive, etc. How do you take this reality and then say Russia is going to attack NATO? I mean, Russia can defend against NATO. That's a different question altogether.
October 2023 marked a decisive shift in the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine. Over the single month, Russia seized an astounding 800 square kilometers territory gained at a pace and scale that had previously seemed unreachable. To put this in perspective, in just 7 days, Russian forces advanced more than they had throughout the entirety of 2023. This astonishing record has left military analysts worldwide reevaluating the dynamics of this battlefield, especially given the suddenness and intensity of these operations. As noted by military expert Inspector Scott Ritter, such rapid, extensive territorial gains demonstrate an impressive level of planning and strategic patience, two characteristics that seem to define the current Russian campaign. Unlike in prior months, where Russian advances were more limited and sporadic, this October assault was a sweeping, coordinated effort, capturing not just rural outposts, but substantial urban centers and entire municipalities. Key cities like Selido fell quickly, with Russian forces overwhelming Ukraine's defenses in record time. In each case, we saw a disciplined, methodical approach, precise artillery strikes, rapid troop mobilization, and consistent pressure on supply lines, which all culminated in a scenario that Ukrainian forces were unable to counter effectively. These gains represent much more than a few redrawn lines on a map. They signify a significant destabilization of Ukraine's defensive lines in the east, weakening the foundation of Ukraine's control over these critical regions. This month's rapid advances are not isolated incidents either. They highlight the culmination of a long-term Russian strategy to erode Ukrainian defenses gradually and precisely, drawing Ukrainian resources thin and exhausting their capacity for a robust defense. With each village and town that changes hands, Russia is reasserting control over territories long contested, but now claimed with decisiveness and strength. From Selido and beyond, this October campaign has been a case study in strategic momentum. Russia's ability to combine speed with calculated precision has generated a domino effect, destabilizing broader Ukrainian defenses and leaving Kyiv in a position of limited options in response. This unprecedented momentum is now driving Russian forces deeper into Ukrainian defenses, marking a new phase in this campaign. Next, we turn to Uglidar, a city that proved to be both a symbolic and strategic turning point in this ongoing conflict. Uglidar was more than just a city, it was a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. For nearly 2 years, Uglidar held out against Russian offensives, with Ukrainian leaders proudly asserting that this fortress-like city would stand strong. But despite Ukraine's confidence, Russia was methodically laying the groundwork for a breakthrough. In a maneuver that appears almost surgical in its execution, Russia surrounded Uglidar on 3 strategic fronts. Russian forces effectively cut off supply and reinforcement routes, systematically isolating the city from the support it needed to endure another offensive. Within days, Uglidar's so-called impenetrable defenses crumbled. Analysts are now looking back and questioning how Ukraine's expectations for Uglidar's defenses went so awry. While Kyiv had used Uglidar as an example of resilience, Russia's quiet preparation behind the scenes turned the tide. They reinforced supply lines, mobilized reserves, and built up their capacity to launch an overwhelming assault. When the time came, Russian troops executed their plan with minimal resistance from a city that had once been a beacon of Ukrainian strength. The swift fall of Uglidar was more than just another victory for Russian forces. It marked a clear shift in the momentum of this conflict. Notably, Russia's approach was both swift and disciplined, leaving no time for Ukrainian forces to regroup or counter. With Uglidar under Russian control, the way was open for further advances across eastern Ukraine. The psychological impact of this defeat cannot be overstated. The loss of Uglidar sent a clear message about the vulnerability of other so-called fortified cities and shook the confidence of Ukrainian troops stationed in the region. With Ugledar firmly under control, Russia moved immediately to capitalize on the momentum. Their next offensive would push even deeper into Ukrainian defenses, setting the stage for a larger operation across eastern Ukraine. Let's explore this next phase of Russia's campaign. Following their success in Ugledar, Russian forces launched the so-called post-Ugledar offensive, a calculated push into Ukraine's defensive heartlands. Within mere days, Russian troops had captured several more towns of tactical importance: Zolotonaiva, Vodiane, Novokrenka, Bohoyavlenka, and Shakhtarsky. Each of these gains demonstrated a level of tactical prowess that left Ukrainian defenses scrambling to respond. The approach was clear. Russia surrounded these locations, applying pressure from multiple angles, and used precision strikes to disrupt any potential reinforcements. Russia's approach in this phase was strategic rather than overwhelming. By surrounding each town and blocking supply routes, they were able to create small encirclements, forcing Ukrainian forces into disadvantageous positions. Each captured town represented not just a tactical victory, but a methodical breakdown of Ukraine's broader defensive capabilities. The speed with which these towns fell underscores Russia's tactical adaptability, a point that many Western analysts initially underestimated. Instead of stretching their forces thin, Russian commanders focused on smaller, concentrated advances, each one further weakening the integrity of Ukraine's eastern defenses. The impact of this methodical campaign is not limited to the map. By seizing these towns, Russia has severely disrupted Ukraine's supply chains, effectively creating a bottleneck for reinforcements and supplies. The fall of each town leaves fewer safe zones for Ukrainian forces to regroup, making any counteroffensive exponentially harder. As Inspector Scott Ritter has noted, this post-Ugledar offensive showcases Russia's capacity to maintain control over multiple axes of advance without sacrificing precision or discipline. Each victory compounds Ukraine's vulnerabilities, creating a domino effect that extends deep into the heart of the Eastern Front. As each town fell, Russian forces edged closer to one of Ukraine's last significant defensive lines, Kharkov. This next target would prove critical as both a military and psychological stronghold. Let's examine why Kharkov has become so crucial in the current stage of this campaign. Kharkov, positioned at a strategic point in eastern Ukraine, was intended to be a formidable stronghold in Ukraine's defensive network, a critical barrier to Russia's advance. Nestled among rivers, dense forests, and elevated terrain, Kharkov is surrounded by natural defenses that make it a fortress by design. Ukraine had fortified this area heavily, anticipating that it could hold back Russian forces for months, if not years. But in a matter of just 2 weeks, Russian forces have managed to press to the very edges of this supposed bastion. Russian troops now encircle the city, applying pressure on every side. According to military analyst Inspector Scott Ritter, this rapid approach to Kharkov showcases the effectiveness of Russia's strategy, demonstrating that Russian command has prioritized both patience and precision in this campaign. Rather than immediately storming fortified positions, Russian forces have systematically weakened Kharkov's defensive lines, disrupting reinforcements and creating smaller encirclements to wear down Ukrainian defenses from within. This calculated approach to Kharkov is more than a show of brute force, it's a display of advanced tactical patience. Russia has methodically degraded the supply routes, weakening Ukraine's defensive positions and depriving them of the logistical support needed to sustain a prolonged defense. Ukrainian forces stationed in Kharkov are visibly strained. Cut off from reliable reinforcements and with their supply routes compromised, the defenders face mounting pressure from continuous artillery strikes and probing assaults. Russian units maintain steady advances, effectively isolating the city and making each escape route more dangerous than the last. Should Kharkov fall, it would mark not only a tactical victory for Russia, but a psychological one as well. The loss of this city would dismantle a vital link in Ukraine's eastern defense chain, leaving additional nearby regions exposed and vulnerable to rapid Russian advances. The fall of Kharkov would resonate beyond the city's walls, undermining Ukraine's defensive strategy across the entire eastern front. But this single stronghold is just one part of Russia's broader campaign. Next, we look at how this battle for control has far-reaching implications across the region. Russia's campaign in eastern Ukraine has evolved beyond simple territorial gain. It's about dismantling the core of Ukraine's defensive networks. The victories at Ugledar and Kharkov, while significant in themselves, reveal a much larger strategy at play. Russia's advances have not only broken through specific fortified towns, but have put immense strain on the entire logistical framework supporting Ukraine's efforts in the east. With each successive gain, Russia has systematically weakened Ukraine's ability to respond, reinforcing their own control over strategic supply routes, communication lines, and key terrain. One immediate consequence is Ukraine's diminished ability to replenish frontline defenses. Supply routes are heavily disrupted, with critical logistical pathways severed or compromised, leaving Ukrainian units undersupplied and often isolated. Ukrainian soldiers face deteriorating conditions and lack essential reinforcements, adding to a growing morale crisis. Recent data has shown Ukrainian casualties spiking to unprecedented levels, with daily personnel losses reportedly reaching as high as 2,700 during intense fighting. Such losses have a ripple effect, as the reduction in manpower not only weakens immediate defenses, but also makes it harder for Ukraine to mount effective counterattacks or hold additional positions. From a strategic perspective, this tactic serves Russia in more ways than one. By creating sustained pressure on supply and reinforcement networks, Russia has secured a level of tactical depth that extends far beyond the front lines. Each captured territory becomes a staging ground, enabling Russian forces to stabilize their supply lines and prepare for further advances. Russian strongholds now dot the landscape, reinforcing positions that allow for greater control and flexibility. The establishment of these logistical hubs across eastern Ukraine not only consolidates Russia's gains, but also effectively transforms these regions into fortified outposts, enhancing their long-term hold over eastern Ukraine. With Ukraine's defenses weakening under this strategic pressure, Russia appears poised to push further northward, continuing to target key strongholds with the same systematic approach. Let's now examine Russia's northern advance towards Pokrovsk, following the gains in the south and east. Russia turned its focus northward, setting its sights on another critical region, Pokrovsk. This area, which includes important towns like Vishnev, Kharkivka, and Vovchenka, has become the latest target in Russia's relentless push to secure strategic strongholds across eastern Ukraine. Russia's strategy here is consistent with its approach. In previous territories used precision strikes to isolate each target, surround them from multiple fronts, and sever any escape or reinforcement routes. The scale and speed of this northern advance have made it challenging for Ukrainian forces to defend effectively. Each town that falls tightens the encirclement around remaining Ukrainian-held areas, effectively isolating defensive positions and limiting Ukraine's capacity to regroup. The assault on Pokrovsk is notable for its methodical approach, a tactical hallmark of the Russian campaign that has allowed them to maintain steady pressure on Ukraine without overextending their own forces. Russian forces employ precision artillery and aerial support to break down fortified positions, while ground units move in to secure and hold each town, systematically closing off Ukrainian pockets of resistance. Pokrovsk is significant not only for its location, but for its symbolic role as one of the last major lines of resistance in this part of the region. The loss of this area would further isolate Ukrainian forces and deepen Russia's control over eastern Ukraine. Visuals from the field show the aftermath of relentless Russian bombardments, destroyed landscapes, abandoned artillery, and Ukrainian defensive positions reduced to rubble. Each town secured in this northern offensive reinforces Russia's strategic depth and brings them closer to securing a critical axis of control in eastern Ukraine. The ripple effect is clear as Ukrainian forces are forced to fall back. Russia's grip over these key territories tightens, cementing their advances. As Russian forces continue their advance in the north, it's becoming increasingly clear that Ukraine's remaining defenses are under severe strain. Next, we'll analyze the broader consequences of these territorial gains and what they mean for the future of the conflict in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine's defense in the east now stands on the brink. With 15 cities already under Russian control and several more teetering toward collapse, the Ukrainian strategy is struggling under immense strain. Supply lines that once fueled the front lines are now fractured, leaving isolated pockets of Ukrainian troops vulnerable. Each reinforcement attempt encounters relentless Russian artillery and UAV surveillance, which intercepts convoys and disrupts coordination. But the stark reality is that Ukraine's strongholds are dwindling, and even with NATO support, there are clear limits against Russia's persistent, well-coordinated pressure. As Russian UAVs dominate the skies, striking with both precision and frequency, Ukrainian forces are pushed into defensive maneuvers that leave little room for counteroffensives. Attempting to regroup under these conditions has proven incredibly costly, as Russian firepower continually weakens each position before it can regain strength. This battle is more than an isolated struggle. It reflects a broader shift, revealing the new dynamic on the Eastern Front, where Russia's momentum reshapes the conflict and challenges the balance of power. But this isn't just about Ukraine's immediate struggle. The broader implications are profound, signifying a shift in regional power dynamics. Russia's tactical patience and calculated offensives demonstrate a strategic depth that goes beyond brute force. Western analysts frequently underestimated Russia, assuming that Russian setbacks signaled a lack of preparation. But as these recent advances show, Russia was fortifying behind the scenes, waiting for the right moment to strike with precision. As Inspector Scott Ritter has pointed out, Russia's careful, step-by-step approach highlights a formidable long-term strategy that now reshapes the Eastern Front. In the coming weeks, all eyes remain on Russia's advances. With each territorial gain, Russia redefines the landscape of this conflict. As Kharkov and nearby towns brace for impact, the reality is clear: the Eastern Front is shifting irreversibly.